One last thing I want to mention about data frames and tibbles in terms of distinctions between them is if I want to add an additional variable onto the end of a data frame. So I've got this data frame, data F, and remember it had one column that was numbers, one, two, three, four, another column that was letters, A, B, C, D. So let's say I want to add a new column to the end of that data frame, which is just 1, 2. So notice this has two values, but all of my other variables, right, there were four rows in my data frame. So what's going to happen when I add a column that has length 2 to a data frame that has four rows to it? Let's take a look. It decided to just keep repeating those two values over and over again until it, hit the last row of the data frame. So no problem. You want to add a new variable onto the data frame. That variable is not the same length as the number of rows that are currently in the data frame. That's okay. I'm just going to repeat your data, that column. I'm just going to repeat the values in the column until I reach the end of the data frame. So that's how it works with data frames. If I try and do this with a tibble, I get an error message here. So it is unable to add a vector that has length 2 to a tibble that has four rows in it, for example. So that's a much shorter way of summarizing what this error is saying. But yeah, it's saying this data has four rows. The column that you're trying to add has only two rows. I can't do that. The weird thing is, if I try and add a single value to it, then it's okay. It just adds it over and over and over again. So that it can do. Over here, if I manually tell it to take that vector 1, 2 and repeat it 2 times, it is able to add a vector that has the same length as the other vectors in, or the other columns in the data frame. So the options for adding a column to a tibble is that it either has length 1, so you're going to add that same value over and over again for every observation in the data frame, or you can add a column only if it has the exact same length as the number of rows that are currently in the tibble. With a data frame, you can add a vector of any length onto a data frame as long as it will just recycle the values of the vector until it reaches the end of the column. A good question might be, like, what happens if I try and add a vector that has more observations? So let's say if I wanted to add like something that had 6 observations to a data frame that only has 4 columns, that I can't do. So to be very clear, I can't add like any length column onto a data frame, but what I can do is I can add a column that has length less than or equal to the number of rows of the data frame. And if it is less than the number of rows in the data frame, then it will recycle the values until it reaches the end of the data frame. Okay, so that is a wrap on getting into the weeds a little bit about tibbles and data frames. For the rest of this module, we're going to be working in the tidyverse with the tidyr package, and we're going to be working with data sets that are going to be stored as tibbles. So I just want you to be aware of that. In your mind, you might not even see the difference between tibble and data frame. That's okay, but we're technically going to be working with tibbles, and these are nicer objects to be working with inside of the tidyverse. Thanks.